Welcome to Take the Lead Radio with Dr. Diane Hamilton, where she interviews some of the most successful leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, speakers, and other individuals who will inspire you to take the lead in your career and personal life. And now, here is Dr. Diane Hamilton.
Welcome to Take the Lead Radio. This is Dr. Diane Hamilton, and I'm so glad you joined us today because we have Tony Ann Marcolini and 𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐼𝐻𝐿 here. Tony is an author and producer. She's also general counsel to the United States Presidential Culinary Museum. And 𝐼𝐻𝐿 is the CEO Confidant, international TV host, public speaker, CEO, consultant, and philanthropist. This is going to be a really interesting show. I hope you stay tuned, and we'll be back right after this message.
Are you interested in finding out more about how HR professionals or leadership consultants can become certified to give the groundbreaking new Curiosity Code Index assessment? The certification program will provide the ability to administer the assessment at reduced rates. Participants will learn how to interpret the results of the CCI, as well as how to deliver an innovation plan workshop designed to improve curiosity, engagement, innovation, and productivity. To find out more, go to CuriosityCode.com.
I am here with Tony Ann Marcolini, who has been practicing law for 28 years. She got her bachelor's degree in political science from St. John's University and her JD from Seton Hall. This is going to be a really interesting difference because I don't get a lot of lawyers on the show, so I'm really looking forward to this. Tony, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, I was looking forward to this. Our good friend Marty Mangiello introduced us. And I kind of want to get a backstory on you because you've argued cases before the Supreme Court, New Jersey. You've done all these really interesting things. How did you get interested in law, and how did you meet Marty?
Wow, two questions, loaded questions right off the bat.
Right off the bat.
In terms of law, it's a weird little story. I was in the 5th grade, and I watched a movie with my mom that had a great female lawyer in it. And back in those days, it was like the 70s. You really didn't see too many female lawyers like depicted in entertainment.
What was it?
And you know what? I don't even remember.
Oh, that's funny.
But I remember that I saw this female lawyer, and I was like, wow, I could do that. I want to be that. And I remember talking to my mom. I was like, I think I want to be a lawyer. And of course, I was in the 5th grade, so I'm sure she didn't take it too seriously. And she was like, great, honey, you can do it. And she's very encouraging, but I never deviated. I went from that point in high school. People would say, what do you want to be when you get out? And I'd be like, I want to be a lawyer. So I never really wanted to be anything else.
Wow. That's so interesting because I had Ginny Whitelaw on recently, and she told me a story that she wanted to work for NASA as a kid. She saw it on the television. She ended up working for NASA. So it's amazing the impact that can make. So you ended up going and becoming a lawyer. What kind of law did you practice?
I'd say when I started out, I was more of a general practitioner, but then I slowly began focusing on family law. Mm-hmm. And then I went even more specifically into, family trial law. I did a lot of really kind of complicated matrimonial trials. I say that family bar is probably the most underestimated set of lawyers out there because people don't think much of the ones doing the family law, the divorces, the custody battles, but those guys are in court every day. They're like the best trial lawyers because everything is scheduled. 5 days a week, you're in court, you're on your feet, you're arguing, you're trying, you're the most familiar with like the rules of evidence. You're on your feet arguing all the time and sometimes multiple cases a day. They're the really ones in the trenches.
Oh, that's interesting. I always think of that as more depositions and things like that. Do you do a lot of depositions in that line?
Oh, depositions, of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're never stopping because it's all litigation. No one's ever happy.
Yeah.
So,
is that hard to be around that though, with everybody fighting? And I mean, what is? How do you get over that kind of sense that everybody hates everybody? You know what I mean? When you get into that kind of realm.
Well, I mean, it's very stressful. It was very stressful on me anyway. A lot of years of kind of absorbing true misery. I mean, because that's where you are. I mean, you're at the lowest point in most people's lives, and you're kind of carrying that sense of misery and that stress with you. It's a high stress job, and you don't want to make mistakes. You're dealing with people's lives. You want to do the best you can, and you're kind of counseling them through this really miserable time. So it was hard, and it was hard for me. I mean, eventually I wound up leaving the field because I wound up getting cancer. I mean, I had I wound up with ovarian cancer, and so it was it kind of, for me, the stress eventually did get to me, but that's what made me want to focus more, on transactional law, like I do more at the, right now I'm general counsel for the United States Presidential Culinary Museum, as we talked about how I met Marty.
Yeah.
Marty Mongello, Chef Marty's fantastic, funny, just, entertaining, intelligent guy. He was a chef to many presidents.
Great guest on the show too.
He does a great Bill Clinton imitation.
That's great. Well, when you're saying that, I was wondering if you appreciated the before we got into Marty, you mentioned the legal issues and all that. Did you appreciate that first scene in Wedding Crashers where they're not? Did you see that movie?
I did.
You shut your mouth when you're talking to me. I laugh every time she says that.
Well, it was a lot like that. I spent years, in the middle of I think the way I emphasize what family law looks like most of all when you're trying to negotiate is once I spent an hour and a half with a couple fighting over a rotisserie. And collectively they spent like $1,500 in counsel fees fighting over the rotisserie, and I'm like, what kind of chicken does it make?
And how many could you have bought for that much to replace it? That's the funniest thing.
Well, but it was the
really
right.
Yeah, you got to look at the psychology. Did you have to learn any psychological counseling with that? Did you try and you've got so much negotiating you've got to do,
Well, I had a small background. I minored in psychology at St. John's University. So I had a little background. But to be honest with you, the rest is trial by fire. You just kind of get thrown into the middle, and you eventually figure out how to break up a fight.
Oh, that's they always say that when the police get called to domestic disputes, it's like the most dangerous thing. So you probably got in the middle of a lot of that. But so you switched to this being this prestigious, United States Presidential Culinary Museum general counsel. So what does that entail?
I do a lot of corporate contract matters I handle, and some intellectual property. As you know, Marty is always in the middle of something, and interesting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's got trademarks and copyrights and things that I handle. And there's always a contract going on that I'm negotiating or drafting. So that's the kind of stuff I do. And it keeps me entertained. Marty's very charismatic, and there's always something going on, with him or at the museum. And additionally, I teach law for Middlesex College. So I'm kind of training, I guess, a new generation to go out into the world, and that's interesting too. I love it. I mean, I love both things. I'm very happy with where my life is at this point. I think the kids keep me young. They're great, and they're interested. They're eager.
It is.
I didn't know what to expect when I started teaching. I guess I had this impression that no one would be really interested, that they were, younger kids and who'd be interested in law really at that age. And that they would be taking classes just, I don't know why.
Right.
In my head, but, and then they got in there and they asked the most intriguing questions, and they're really interested in the material. And we get these great debates going sometimes in class. And I like to do a great project where I do like a little mini moot court in the classroom, and
Cool.
kids really get into it. I mean, they want to win and they go all at it. I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, that's great. You know, I actually teach at several universities, and one of them is Thomas Edison State University in New Jersey, which is kind of interesting because that's where you are, right? New Jersey?
I am.
Yes, yes. And I found really motivated. Maybe it's New Jersey. The students are super motivated, but I've had really good. I actually had one of my students go off and start a company. I'm on their board for that, Leader Kid Academy. Rishi Dixit was one of my students, and he's got this company, and it's really great to see your students go out and produce these amazing things. But speaking of producing, I saw that you were a writer and co-producer for a web series. Is it a dramedy?
Yes, I was. We did. It was Surviving Sam. It was a dramedy, and it had 𝐜𝐿icia from All My Children and a bunch of other projects. And it's just she's a funny, charismatic woman. She was starring in it, and Rob Magnotti, a great impressionist. He was on the David Letterman, and John Duddy, the the boxer, the handsome former boxer turned actor, who's just great. He was in the Robert De Niro movie. He was in the John Bon Jovi video, and yeah, they did such a good job with the material. It was wonderful to watch. I mean, when you write something on paper, then to actually see it, in action, that was a great experience.
How did you get involved in that? I had Sheila Berry Driscoll, from Driscoll Strawberries. She does a lot of, producing and different things within the entertainment industry, and she was talking about pitching these ideas and what she likes to see in a pitch, and it was a great show. I'm curious, what got you interested in that? That's a little different.
Right. Well, I mean, I think when I was younger, I started writing a book when I was young too. Talking about this that you start when you're a kid.
Right.
And I guess it was something in the back of my head that always, nagged at me that I wanted to do some writing, as well as the law. But, that my career took me off in a path that always kept me busy. And then eventually I got to, I got this idea in my head, because the show really was about a couple in the middle of a divorce.
Of course, yeah.
Which made it funny, and they were like forced to live together. And I saw so much of that where couples couldn't really afford to truly separate until let's say, divorce was over. So during the pendency of the divorce, they stayed in the same house, and that overriding conflict that was there. There was a lot of humor in it. Yeah. I'm sorry to say.
Well, it's kind of like that War of the Roses. Did you ever see War of the Roses with Danny DeVito?
Yes, I did.
My brother always laughed at the last scene where she just, in her dying breath, she takes his hand and takes it off of her body, as he's trying to comfort her in her death. And is it that kind of a humor where it's just, they've got this issue, but they can still laugh? You can still laugh at it?
Well, yeah, there was a bittersweet sweet quality to the show as well, where they actually deep down still had feelings for each other, but it had been so convoluted with all this, with all this battling that they did, because they were such different personalities. So it wound up being a funny series. I mean, I really, I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into trying to make that as accurate as I could. And, they did such a wonderful job with the material. So I put something together, and I wrote it with my law partner, Maria Plinio. And we kind of started kicking around ideas one day, and we just put it to paper. And then one thing led to another. I mean, we just... once the rock started rolling down the hill, we just kept going with it. And
how were you able to find people to actually put it on the air? I mean, that's tough to do, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's just a series. I had met a lot of people along the way, just in practicing law. So it was just a matter of, I guess, connections. You just start making one call after another, and I wasn't terribly shy about that either.
So you use that your background to create this series, but you also are using what you've learned from 2 decades in family court to write a book, right? And that's what you're working on now. Am I right?
I am right now. I'm working on that. Eventually, I plan to get back to the I think working in TV. I have one project cooking right now with with a producer, but that's, I think, right. I'm going to get back to focusing on that more after I finish the book. But I am working on a book right now about my years in family law. And again, I think I put together a lot of observations about relationships because I kept seeing the same exact issues on almost like a repeat loop, if you will.
Like what kind of issues? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, the people who would come to you and say, this person that they wound up getting from when they were cheating with that person, and then that person eventually cheats on them, right? Like, right. Or the he'd never do that to me, or she'd never do that to me. Well, I sat by and I watched her, him or her do these horrible things to other people, but I knew I was somehow protected.
Right.
I like to call that the Anne Boleyn syndrome, right? Because he didn't think anything like when he was tossing out the wife he was with for a lot of years, then he was cutting her off for the child, and he was doing all these horrible things to the wife, and she kind of went along like, oh yeah, but I'm good, like he'd never do that to me, and it's like yeah he would.
Right. I know
he would do it to you, like and he did. And then she's headless at some point, right? So it's just it's things on repeat. And I saw that stuff so many times in relationships. So I kind of compiled like a list of what I saw most of how relationships fail and how you're in a toxic relationship almost from the beginning. And because when I would sit and I talk with whoever I had, the male or the female, the wife or the husband, they would tell me things and it would be like, you didn't see that before, like that was just now, and it was like, no, like there were always signs. And then when you take them back far enough, they're all the same signs. I mean, they all have these things in common. So I kind of put together what I think is kind of just an eclectic mix of, hey, these are my observations of practicing family law, of relationships and why they fail most, and kind of how to know you're in a bad one right from the start.
That would be interesting, but some of it you wonder how many people grow out of some issues that they had, or how much is a repeat kind of stuff. I mean, you're only seeing the worst cases who are coming to the lawyers, you know what I mean? So you never hear the people who actually improved, I guess, right?
No, it's true. A judge used to tell me, in criminal court, you saw bad people at their worst. And in family court, you saw good people. I got that wrong. You see bad people at their best in criminal law, but in family law, you'd see good people at their worst. Right. So I did see you when you were in absolute ruins. I didn't get to see the people. Nobody came to me and said, "Hey, we went to counseling, we worked through our issues."
Right. Did you ever have any of them actually get back together though? That it just worked out, or they always ended up negative?
I had many people get back together and come back 2 years later.
Well, it's hard, I mean, I don't know. Are you married?
I'm not.
No. That probably talked you out of it, right?
Left a bad taste in my mouth.
It's challenging. I've been with my husband for going on 31 years, and we've only been married, but I'll go on 26 of them. But you meet people and you think, yeah, this is just so challenging, and it's got to be an interesting book to write. Have you ever wanted to, since you like the production stuff in the movie realm, have you ever wanted to be like Judge Judy? I got to see her in person. She was a tiny little thing. She's like half my size. I'm 5'8". I think she can't be 5 feet. There's no way. But she was really cute and witty and interesting. Is that something you would ever even think of doing, something like what she does?
No, I don't think so. I don't really have that. I'm more of an arguer.
Yeah.
I was so many years on the other side advocating. And I couldn't see myself, I don't think, in the judge role.
Yeah.
Isn't that odd? Because I knew a lot of my, fellow attorneys, that's what they wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I ever saw myself in that light.
Yeah, that would be a hard thing. I mean, I would imagine, just for your safety. Do you ever worry about your safety as a lawyer? I guess not so much. I mean, the other side being so mad at you for helping their side. You know what I mean?
I did. I mean, there were a few times where I had an attorney that I knew of. It's used to be in court with him frequently, and he got run down by the angry spouse. And the other spouse, he was representing the wife, and the husband ran him down. So of course you worry about that. I had another attorney whose building kind of blew up. So
Kind of.
it did blow up. I mean, and they didn't know, they never really found out how it happened or who was behind it. So, I mean, of course you worry. I mean, a lot of times you are breaking up fights, and nobody's happy. And of course the other side doesn't like you. There really isn't a winning in family court. I used to always say, there's just, a result.
Right, right. Were the men or the women more challenging, you think?
Oh, well, it really depends on how emotional the man was. Sometimes the men did look at it slightly more with a business mind than the women did, but I found that the men, and this is a gross generalization that people are going to hate, but I found that often the men were more revenge oriented.
Oh, really? Is it more whoever got left is more revenge oriented, probably, right? Male or
whoever feels more wronged.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I would imagine. Well, you said you're working on a new production. Is your production based on this kind of thing too?
No, actually, I'm delving out into the murder realm.
Oh, really?
On this one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm working on a true life murder that we had here in New Jersey. In the 20s, double homicide of minister and his wife. Minister and his lover, I should say, not his wife.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's an unsolved murder. There was a big famous trial of the century that happened, and I just find it a fascinating case. People still talk about it now, but it was a New Jersey case. It was tried at the Somerset County Courthouse here. They did wind up arresting his wife, and they had a big trial. So I think there's a lot of interest still in this story. It's kind of a famous double homicide, and it was the first ever case that really created a frenzy, like a media frenzy here in New Jersey. That the sense of the tabloid sensationalism, and this first case that ever really had that here. That even the New York Times came in every day to the Somerset County Courthouse to follow this case when it came to trial. So it's kind of exciting, and that's my next project up when I finish the book.
That's interesting. I'm trying to think that we had Bob Crane got murdered here, the guy from Hogan's Heroes in Arizona. Yeah, that was our big one. But it wasn't as big of a thing as this sounds. But do you have when you come up with this, do you have actors in mind of who you would like to play, the two main husband and wife? You
always kind of get an image, but these people were real, so I guess I kind of see the actual people when I'm putting it together. But I don't really have anybody in mind yet. Isn't that weird? But I don't think I'll have much of a say. This one I'm going to do old-fashioned, try to find a network and pitch it, and hopefully get it on a more established platform. That's the avenue I want to take this next one. I think it's a much grander scale project, so I doubt I'll have any say in anything.
Where did Surviving Sam air?
It was just a web series based on the web.
I see. Well, I think that I like true crime stuff to watch. I mean, I had Dion Graham was on the show. He's the voice behind the First 48. He's an actor in Hollywood, is on The Wire and a bunch of other things. And I think the crime kind of shows like that are they're really interesting. And right now everybody's binge watching everything. It's a good time to come up with. Would yours be a series again, or just one show?
No, I can easily could see this, being a series, either a limited series or or you can get more like even the Tudors. You could get a solid, 5 years out of how this evolves.
Wow. Wow.
Where it has, it obviously has a finite ending, and it couldn't go on in infinite. It couldn't go on for too long, but you could get a certain amount. There's enough material to get a certain amount of years even out of it.
Well, I think that, that is so interesting to look at what people are able to create and turn into a movie. I would love to do that kind of thing, because I know it's so, I don't know. It's just, there's so much to it. And I've had so many people on the show who've pitched different things, and just coming up with the pitch decks and the business side behind it fascinates me, I guess I should say. But so I always appreciate when something comes out that's really good and well researched and put together with great acting and all that. And I'm very impressed by all the things you've done, and I really appreciate you coming on the show to share what you're working on. And I know a lot of people are going to be interested to find out more if they want to follow you, read your books, do what see how to follow you on social media or whatever sites you want to share. Is there something you could share so people can do that?
Well, I mean, I have my Twitter account and that's A Marcolini Law, and that's probably the best place, I guess, Twitter. Of course, you can always the Into the Patriots, which is Marty Mangello's site. If you want to check out what the museum is up to, is always a great site.
Yeah.
Other than that, I really don't have any other websites or the like, or. That's the best place, I think, my Twitter account.
Well, they can always check out Marty's show on here, and we'll link to that in this episode, so they can learn more about the United States Presidential Culinary Museum. And this was so much fun, Tony. This was really interesting, and good luck with your book and your next production. I can't wait.
Thank you, Diane. It was a pleasure.
It was, and you're welcome. And we'll be back right after this message. Curiosity is a critical and direct link to improving motivation and communication-based issues that challenge organizations. By improving workers' curiosity, you can enhance employee engagement, emotional intelligence, innovation, productivity, and many other byproducts that come with that intrinsic but underutilized attribute. To find out more about how to improve curiosity, please go to curiositycode.com. I am here with Angel Rebo, who is known as the CEO Confidant. He's an influencer, international TV host, public speaker, CEO, consultant, board member, and philanthropist. In the last 21 years, he's empowered more than 1,500 CEOs in 33 different countries. It's so exciting to have you here, Angel.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. The excitement is mine, because I really like to be able to have a conversation with you, and obviously thank you to your audience for being here listening to us.
Well, this is going to be fun. I know that you and I do some similar things, because consulting, speaking, hosting, some of the stuff that we do. But I want to get a little backstory on you. I know you speak 5 languages. We talked about that a little before the show. We talked about a little bit, but I know you have this international foundation, Wisdom for Kids. You've got all these different things that you work on. So I just want a little backstory on who is Angel.
Yes, thank you. So I'm originally from Spain, near Barcelona, northeast of Spain, and very early on in my life, my mom and dad decided that although they were, originally, from not from an international background, but very grounded to their, local communities, they wanted me to learn foreign languages, and I think that was definitely. I mean, don't ask me why they did that, but I reached out. High school. I was graduating from high school knowing to speak, French and English almost perfectly. And thanks to my mom and dad deciding that they wanted me to learn those languages for my future. So that definitely defined the rest of my life. In the 90s, after working with some local companies in Spain and knowing, how to speak English and French and obviously Spanish and Catalan language. And then I was learning Portuguese. I decided to start an international career. So I moved out of Spain and I went to work to the UK. And that was my first, in the 90s, that was my first real, employment outside Spain, for a long period of time. And that started my international career. While I was a student in college, I was always on those internships throughout the summer, in other, on other countries in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
But this represented for me starting an international career. And I have to say that, after that, I moved from Europe. I moved from Europe to Mexico. Actually, I lived in Mexico for 10 years, and then 10 years ago, I moved here. So learning languages, and you probably know that for experience, by experience,
mm-hmm.
Opens you to other possibilities, opens
Definitely.
you to have, direct conversations with people that you would otherwise wouldn't have. And I think that definitely defined my future. And when I was working in Mexico and answering your question, how I ended up having Wisdom for Kids, the Foundation Wisdom for Kids, how we founded it, is because when I was living in Latin America, I was going to all those countries in the continent, all those countries, you name it, conducting business, basically, developing the business for other companies and helping business owners at the same time. So all the time I was going to deal with, every time I was going to, deal with the company, we were trying to sell some services or products. I would meet with the CEO of the company or the C-level executives in order to close those negotiations and close those deals. So every time I would go to where those there were manufacturing plants of really any industry, every time I would go to those places, I would talk to very highly influential people, really probably the most influential people in the areas where I was going. And at the same time, before getting into those manufacturing plants, outside those places, as you can imagine, there was poverty.
Right.
Because those manufacturing plants typically are not in the middle of the towns. They
mm-hmm.
are in the outskirts of the cities and the suburbs. So I would always, meet with those kids, underprivileged kids, asking me, hey, why do you all go inside? Why don't you allow us to wash your car? Why don't you, we're going to keep your car safe. Don't worry. Nobody's going to steal the car from you,
Right.
Or, would you buy some gums or some candies from us? So, I had a spiritual experience moving forward in 2015 in which one day it was so clear to me that the reason why I had been so exposed to wealth and I had been so exposed to poverty at the same time, the same day for so many years, there was a reason for that. And that's why I said, I had to create, I had the spiritual experience and I had to create Wisdom for Kids. I reached out to a couple of friends and we created Wisdom for Kids, with which we help underprivileged kids in Latin America, become entrepreneurs using their local resources.
That's really interesting. I've had a lot of people on my show who help underprivileged, in the U.S. in different areas. But I think, getting people ready for an experience that they would have never had is such a rewarding thing to do. I mean, I'm thinking I've had the Year Up. 𝐬𝐚𝐯𝐿 was on, and he does that. There's a great 60-minute piece of what he did to get kids in poverty, a year of training to get them ready to get jobs. And so what age group are you dealing with, and what are you preparing them to do?
Yes, so we have three age groups, and
mm-hmm.
we start at 6 years old, 7 years old. And to your point, it's funny because what you said is so true. Every time we go to a specific community and we talk to the leaders, when we start having a conversation about, we would like to come here, we would like to help the kids in your area, in your community. Every time we talk to the community leaders, every single time, the first question they ask us is, how much is it?
Mm-hmm.
How much is it going to cost us?
Right.
And obviously we tell them it's for free. And they say, wow, really? So why do you do it? Well, just because we think it's our mission, because that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing they say, to your words before, the next thing they say is, wow, if it's not you, nobody ever will come here to do what you guys do. Nobody.
Right,
so if it's not you, these kids will never have the opportunity to be exposed to, to your inspiration, to your knowledge, to your experience, to your wisdom. They're so aware of it that very often when we talk to community leaders, I mean, we don't talk to local governments ever. We just go directly to the community. So very often they tell us, please don't talk to X, Y, and Z because we really want this to happen. We really want this to help our kids in our community. We really want that to happen, and we don't want to be entrenched in any sort of, conversation of any other kind, which is not helping our kids. And we do that all the time. So we really go directly to the grassroots of all those communities.
Well, I mean, it really helps that you speak all the languages and have the background that you've had. What language? You said you speak 5 languages. What are they? I'm curious.
Yes. Yeah, it's Portuguese, English, French, Spanish, and Catalan. In the northeast of Spain, we speak a different language, which is Catalan.
I remember that. And obrigada, I think, is thank you for telling me that in Portuguese. My daughter's fluent in Portuguese. Obrigada is the only word
obrigado,
I know.
exactly.
That's the only word I know.
Exactly.
Obrigada, but
yeah.
She speaks Portuguese so well, they tell her she doesn't even have an accent. And I can't believe that she has it. I can barely speak English, but I think it's really good to get that experience. I had her. She studied in Spain, so she speaks Spanish, and she studied in Italy, so she speaks Italian, and and she particularly liked Portuguese, but she likes Brazilian Portuguese. I found out better than Portugal Portuguese. When we went to Portugal, she said they sound funny, but it's a little different, I guess.
Very good.
Yeah, but are you Brazilian Portuguese or Portuguese from Portugal?
So it's Portuguese from Portugal, because when I learned it, actually, I started learning Portuguese from an architecture student from Porto in Portugal that was actually studying architecture in Spain. It's so funny, in Barcelona. So she was my first ever language teacher, Portuguese language teacher.
Well,
and
that's
then
interesting.
Then I took lessons from many other private teachers and everything, and then I moved to the UK, and I actually started calling into Portuguese accounts from the UK. So it was interesting. That was really a very nice experience for me, because obviously when the language that you learn is different, the language that you learn, with any teacher is different than the language that you speak in the real world, right?
Right.
And I know a few words of here and there with of German and Italian, because I was forced to have business conversations in German. Also because I had to call into German accounts using English, so I started learning German, and also I dated a German girl for 2 years.
Oh, that's
I was going to German. That helped a lot, and I was going to Germany every other week for 2 years. So it was a very intense German experience.
Well, especially the Latin.
But German is difficult.
Yeah, that is difficult. I think once you know the Latin languages, they're easier to get. But my daughter has said that Arabic's just brutal. She tried to do that one, and she can't quite get that one. But I think they're all different and interesting. And I'd like to learn another one. But I think what really is important is to learn the cultural differences in all these different areas. And I know you do a lot of that, and that kind of ties into my work with my last book on perception. We got into the difference. I saw perception as kind of a combination of IQ, EQ for emotional intelligence quotient, CQ for curiosity quotient, and CQ for cultural quotient, to understand how to do business with different cultures and different areas of the world. What do you find is the top issues you deal with when it comes to cultural situations in business?
Well, that's a fascinating conversation right there.
Right.
Because perception is reality, right?
Right.
So exactly. When I go to all those countries, and obviously, every country in Europe and every country even in Latin America, even if they speak the same language, they are different, and they have different cultures, and they approach things differently. So, the main challenges are those what I call the secret contracts. There's something there's a concept called the secret contract, which is things that they think that you should know about them, and things that I think or I hope that they know about me.
You're saying construct?
So, it's very secret contract, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that and that's why managing expectations is so important.
Right.
So I think that every time that you start dealing with or start being in contact with a specific culture, there are those things that are never being told, but that the other people expect from you and you speak from them.
Right.
So it's all about managing expectations. So that's definitely my number one, let's say, source of maybe conflict, right? So I think that the first thing that I always help my clients do and the people I work with do is to make sure that when they start a business relationship with someone, or obviously based on personal relationships, it's always to be able to make sure that they set the right expectations. So regardless of, let's say, the pieces of advice I might give them, regardless of the local, partners that I might introduce them, so that the landing in that country or in that specific geographic area is softer, regardless, I always tell them, don't take anything for granted. Always have the tough conversation up front, because that's going to make things much easier in the short mid-term. And that's often overlooked. We tend to think that, everything is global, and when you do business in one area, you can do business in another, and it's not true.
Yeah, good luck with that.
True. Exactly. And even obviously, I've worked a lot on expansion, right? And expansion, but even with national expansion, even when, let's say, you have a very a thriving business here in the U.S. and you want to open an office in Detroit, in Michigan, you know that you will definitely have to have some local blood,
Right.
local headcount, local people, in order to be able to be successful. It's extremely complicated.
Right.
It's very, very difficult, even to adapt to the way that business is being conducted in another state of the same country. Again, there is always those things that people overlook for not having the tough conversation.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's the most important thing, to be bold enough, to be really willing to make that relationship work, so that eventually you can conduct business with them.
Well, you bring up really important points that were part of why I created my Curiosity Code Index and my Perception Power Index assessments, because I wanted people to realize they don't know what they don't know sometimes. And with when you're talking about culture, a lot of it begins with curiosity, asking questions and listening to answers to develop empathy, which is a big part of emotional intelligence. And as I was saying, in the perception, I thought, EQ is a big part of this. But to really develop that empathy, you have to be very curious about the other cultures. Do you find certain areas of the world are more curious than others?
Well, that's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that in general, I would say it depends. It depends on the country. Let's say Latin America. It's a huge territory. Most of them speak English. Some speak French. Some speak Portuguese.
Right.
Every single country is different, and I would say that there. And to your, I mean, I didn't know about what you just mentioned of your book and what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So as in depth as you described it a minute ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny how I think that IQ plays a key role there.
Right.
And EQ also plays a key role. And my experience has been that there are countries in which they are more open to say okay, they're more open to be complacent.
Mm-hmm.
And there are cultures and countries which they are open to be more, be in a mode of confrontation,
right,
in a positive way. Okay, in a positive way.
Right.
So the answer is definitely yes, and I think that it's more challenging to conduct business in places where the people are more complacent, because it's more difficult to know what they really think and what they really believe in. And then it's funny how there's a factor that really plays a key role there, which is I have experienced, for instance, that depending on where you come from, it is easier to conduct business with in particular areas with specific cultures. And let me tell you an example, for instance. Historically speaking, both Spain and the U.S. have played an important role in Mexico, let's say.
Right.
And they have played, historically speaking, there was the Conquista, a long time ago, and we historically speaking, as Spaniards, we did a few good things and very bad things with Mexico and with Mexicans. And then there was, when we left, the country, obviously a long time ago, then there were a lot of asylum seekers from Spain going to live in Mexico. So there was like a re-encounter between both cultures. But then obviously the economic importance of the U.S. also makes Americans extremely influential. So for different reasons, both Americans and Spaniards, we have a very important footprint in the history of that particular country.
Right,
so that
right.
makes us more prone to actually conduct business there. And I always had these conversations with sales teams I was training in Mexico, how I was able to really work with gatekeepers much easier than other people from other countries or from other cultures. Just because as soon as people would realize I was from Spain, many doors would open.
Right.
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 So to your question, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very different to do business with an Argentinian or with a Colombian or with a Chilean than doing business with a Mexican or a Costa Rican or a Peruvian. Very different.
Very different. Yeah, and that I think that was our goal. Dr. 𝐲𝐚𝐯𝐿 and I wrote the book Power of Perception to kind of help not just American businesses, but businesses throughout the world recognize the value of understanding the perception process. Because you've got this evaluation and prediction that's kind of the interpersonal and intrapersonal part of emotional intelligence. You have to understand yourself, but you also have to understand them, and it's all vantage point to me, and I think so many people just have no idea that somebody else sees something from a different vantage point. And in the business world, that's so important. And I think when you're going into other countries to do business, you're looking for good partnerships, right? So how do you find the right local partners?
Yes, that's a great question. I think to say it's trial and error, to be honest. It's trial and error. And also, it depends on the expectations. And let me tell you an example. So,
okay.
I think that everybody embraces, the right type of partnership and the right type of leadership. And that goes down to how in depth you really care about the other party. As soon as you are able to show consistently that you really care about the other party, then things start to change, and then you not only have a relationship, but you have a partnership. But it takes time, and you have to go through a process of learning. You have to go through a process of having success together and having failures together. So it's a matter of time. Mm-hmm. There's no secret combination. There's no secret sauce to do that. And I was talking about that it depends on culture as well, or on expectations, because, for instance, let me tell you an example. I used to be recruiting partners for different companies I was working with, right? So every single company, right, that I was working with at different points in time in my career, they would have different sets of values and different expectations with our potential future partners, okay? So when I was going to the market and I would talk to other competitors, partners in that area, depending on who they were working with, I would be more successful in really building a strong partnership or not. So let's say I would go and I wanted to, recruit. I wanted to set up a partnership with a particular company that was working at that time with company A, was representing company A in that geography, okay? Mm-hmm. So if the values of that company, if the culture of that company A was a positive, was it really a real partnership, was really caring about this company I wanted to partner up with, then my work would be much easier. But if that culture, if the teaching, if the experience of my partner candidate with that company A was wrong, was bad, their expectations were that their partnership with our company would also be bad. So I would be literally like rolling against the stream for months until I got their trust, and we would be able to build a real trustworthy partnership among us. So I think that's why I was saying before, talking about this secret contract, those things that you never talk about, you never speak about, but they're always there. They're always there. So you mentioned perceptions. Exactly, the perceptions are wrong, but the question is, obviously for me, the question was always, how am I going to overcome those, prejudices that they see right now on that perception? How am I going to make sure that they have all those conversations? How am I going to have a open conversation, upfront conversation with you guys, so that we make sure that you understand me and I understand you. I really want to understand you, and it's in practice that you really get to see this. It's by doing business, it's by contacting business, it's by having conversations that they would really know who we are or who I am, and I would really know who they are.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. And I remember when I first started doing this show many years ago, starting to have cultural quotients talked about for the first time back then. You didn't hear about it too much before that. And since then, we really see the value of this. There's so much to understand in working with different areas of the world. Right when you think you figured out, then now we have this where you have to do it, through Zoom, or you have to do it through whatever tactics. And I think that the more we work on building our curiosity level, to ask questions, to get that empathy, to really understand other people's vantage points, the more successful we will be. And I know you do so much work with your different things. I mentioned as a speaker, as a consultant, philanthropist. What's your international TV hosting that you do? I want to know a little more about that before we go.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So basically, it was 3 years ago. There was a TV network from Spain that hired me. And I had never worked. I had never worked as a TV host. I had received 2 or 3 times in my life, in my career, PR training.
Yeah.
So I knew how to deal with interviews myself. So I knew how to reach out to media and how to hold conversations. So they would be meaningful, and I was going to say what I wanted to say. But when these guys came from Spain, they wanted me to help them expand their business here in North America first, and then Latin America. Okay. What I did is I started to conduct interviews. So fast forward, I've conducted more than 500 interviews in the last 3 years.
Wow.
So so both in English and in Spanish. I think a couple of them in Portuguese, maybe one in French. But so it's like I was in that position, and I have to tell you, the reason why I've done so many hundreds already is because I love it.
Yeah,
I love to be
the
too. Same as you.
Just this, I know.
the same as you. It's every single conversation with a human being. Oh my God, yes. And it's exciting.
Yeah, it
Diane,
is fun.
It's exciting.
It is. I have to say, it is one of the more rewarding things when you get to talk to really interesting people like you and all the people I've had on my show.
Thank you.
And and you see, I think so many people probably learned so much from you, and they could follow you and learn more. So I was wondering if you wanted to share any kind of a link or somehow they could follow you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. It's very easy to follow me. You can go to LinkedIn. My brand, as you said before, my brand is the CEO Confidant. So if you go to LinkedIn and you look for Angel Ribo, Ribo spelled as R-I-B as in boy O, the CEO Confidant, you will find me there. I have a team working with me, so I guarantee you that I'm going to answer all the questions, all the messages that you send to me. And the easiest way to connect with me directly is through my email. So I'm going to give you my direct email, which is angel@angelribo.com. Again, Angel spelled as A-N-G-E-L and Ribo R-I-B as in boy O. Angel@angelribo.com.
That's awesome, Angel. Thank you so much for being on the show. This was really fun. I love to talk about all these kind of perception-based issues that impact culture. So this was great.
Thank you. The pleasure was absolutely mine. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you to everyone listening to us today.
Oh, you're welcome. And we will be back right after this message. Do you know someone who might benefit from taking the Curiosity Code Index assessment? The CCI is the first and only assessment that determines the factors that inhibit curiosity. It's simple. If you recommend the assessment to someone else, you can receive 20% of the purchase price that they pay when they take the CCI through the link provided by you. To obtain the link and become an affiliate, please go to drdianehamilton.com/affiliate. Well, I'd really like to thank both Tony and Angel for being my guests today. We get so many great guests on this show. If you've missed any past episodes, please go to drdianehamilton.com. You can find out so much more there. You can get the Curiosity Code Index, the Perception Power Index. You can read books that we've written on perception or that I've written on curiosity. There's so much content there in addition to the show. So I hope you take some time to do that. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And I hope you join us for the next episode of Take the Lead Radio.